Hello and welcome to the Rustbelt Apartment Podcast, brought to you by the Cooper Multifamily team, where we discuss all things apartments with a keen eye on the Midwest's Rustbelt region. I'm your moderator, Peter Graylis, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts and teammates, Gary Cooper and Anthony DeMarco. Our guest today is Ken Prendergast. Ken has been active in journalism, transportation, and economic development roles for more than 30 years. He's the founder of the Northeast Ohio Transformation blog, commonly called NEOtrans, which has been publishing since 2011. It averages more than 100,000 views per month and regularly scoops mainstream media with its breaking news on business, economic trends, and real estate, staying true to its mantra, usually first and always free. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. I've been hounding you for a bit to join us and perhaps peek behind the curtain a bit on what to me is a fairly interesting, a very interesting and poignant blog, NEOtrans.
Thank you.
That was certainly my first introduction to you when I joined Colliers about 5 years back. A research analyst at Colliers hipped me to NEOtrans. And ever since, I've been following you and your articles, your pieces, and I've enjoyed it. So again, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you.
You've got a pretty unique background. So it's tied to rail transportation and journalism.
Right.
It appears that you're still active in both very much in your day-to-day.
Well, I'm certainly more active in journalism than I am in rail transportation and public transportation. But the background of rail and public transportation ultimately led me to turn the journalism interest into into the blog.
Okay.
And I started the blog 12 years now.
Okay.
12 years ago, and it was to highlight advancements and progress in transit-oriented development, because Greater Cleveland is not expanding its rail system to reach more riders and more residences. And so because of their funding situation, it seemed more logical, instead of trying to extend the rail system to where the riders are, it's to bring the riders to where the rail system is. And that gets into basically what TOD is all about, is putting more bodies, more doorways, more wallets within a comfortable walk of a rail station or any kind of transit station for that matter. Rail is generally seen as more favorable to TOD because it's a fixed facility. It's not going anywhere. So if a real estate developer makes an investment there, a sizable investment, he's pretty sure that rail line is going to be there 20, 30, 40 years from now, rather than the bus, which could come or go. So that was my interest in combining the rail and the journalism angle. And early on, NEOtrans was more about just kind of taking stock of where we are and what are some of the latest projects, and doing them more as summaries and compilations and inventories. That changed about 6 years ago, when one of my old sources from my Sun newspapers days, when I was the last City Hall correspondent for Sun newspapers at Cleveland City Hall, came to me and said, and this was actually about the city of Euclid, said, I don't know if this is something that you want to write about, but I just got word that Amazon is going to be tearing down, or a developer on behalf of Amazon was going to be tearing down Euclid Square Mall and putting up one of those new fulfillment centers. Would you be interested in writing about that? I said, that's not really what I get into, but it is transit accessible, so I can kind of push it a little bit and write about it. The thing got 27,000 views. And I thought, okay, I can work with this. And I began to write more about development that was not necessarily specific to transit, and not necessarily about writing summaries or inventories of where we were. And there were other articles that got, what's the name of the theater here? The Fantasy Theater in Lakewood was sold and going to be closing. and I wrote about that, and that got over 50,000 views. And
Wow.
so that's the kind of thing that led me to realize that there's some potential here, and maybe even some advertising dollars at some point to help sustain it and pay off the cost of the website.
You briefly mentioned your journalism background, right? So we got a bit of some information on your rail and transportation. The journalism side, 20 years at Cleveland Sun newspapers?
Right.
Okay, covering City Hall.
Yeah, I started. I went from Lorain County into Cuyahoga County to Cleveland, so I was steadily working my way into the more urban news coverage. And as I started to cover Cleveland City Hall, I was asking my editor and his editor, why aren't we doing more to cover downtown? It's got a base employment number with some people making some pretty good money. There's advertising dollars there. There's new residences going in there, probably more so than any other suburb in Cuyahoga County, except for maybe Westlake or Strongsville at that time.
Shout out
and
Westlake.
So this is a growth opportunity. Why aren't you guys jumping on it? Well, we're a suburban newspaper chain, and that's not really what we do. I said, well, I thought, business was and journalism was your thing. And so I had a disagreement with them, and I always had this thought in the back of my head, maybe I should just do this myself and write about it. And so there was always that thought in the back of my head going back to the early 2000s of doing something like this. And so there was always the bug there.
Okay. Yeah. Exciting. Yeah. So the blog started in the heydays of blogs. Is this still a blog spot via Google?
We do have it started out as a blog spot, and we keep that going just because it's another place for people to find us. But we don't put full articles on the blog spot. We have a redirect on there. People want to read the rest of the article, they can go to my independent site, which we started in 2021 because we weren't just making enough money on it. Google was taking some of the money away, and we wanted more money for ourselves, of course. And so we started up the independent site, and we had that hosted through one host. And when we get over 300 views in 30 minutes, the site would crash. And that's a good way to just cap your revenues. So we needed to get to a better host. As it turns out, our blog admin and webmaster is in Kyiv, Ukraine, because my wife is Ukrainian, and so we work through him, and our host is here in the U.S. But we got to a host with more capacity, and thank goodness, because when I wrote the articles last summer about the Browns Stadium, we were over 1,000 views in 30 minutes, and in some cases over 1,500 views. We never would have been able to make that on the old hosting site. So we went from Blogspot to a host to a different host, and that's where we're going to stay for a while.
Okay, good stuff. Now you mentioned you keep saying we are. I assumed it was just a one-man show, but oftentimes it isn't.
Yeah, and we've had some different people come and go. I've had a researcher help me out from time to time. His name appeared at the bottom of some of the articles.
Okay.
I've had a graphics person that I can turn to if I need to. When I hear that, well, there's going to be a skyscraper proposed for this spot, and it's going to look kind of like this. Can you give me a massing of what it might look like? So, we were doing that for Sherwin-Williams with its headquarters, because I was getting verbal descriptions, but nobody would release any graphics to me because they would create a trail and they would be able to figure out who it was.
Hold on. So, you were getting verbal descriptions of the new headquarters?
Yeah, of what it would look like. And they said, well, it's going to look like this building in this city. And I said,
someone inside Sherwin.
Someone very close to the situation, yes. So he was giving me verbal descriptions of what it would look like, and I go to my graphics guy and I said, this is what it sounds like. And I have kind of a graphics sense myself. I do some of my own map graphics, but he came up with massings of what the building would look like, and they were pretty close to what was built. So I had those two people. I also have a freelancer working for me now because there's just too much out there to cover. And even so, we're still not hitting everything. And then my wife does a tremendous amount of work for us. She handles some social media for us. She handles advertising. Her background is in business and in marketing.
Okay.
So, she's been a tremendous help to me.
Okay.
You know,
Editorial process of the blog. Would you consider yourself the editor?
yeah. Yeah.
Things filter through you. You're choosing what to publish, what not to publish.
Right. And I had some of that background when I was at All Aboard Ohio, which is the rail nonprofit organization. So I wrote and edited the newsletter. And I did that from 1993 until just a couple of years ago, because I needed to focus on the blog. I also did a lot of the writing of the editorials at some newspapers. So when they needed to get an opinion of the newspaper, they asked me if I could write it. I wrote a lot of headlines. So I have a lot of experience in that area.
Well, there you are, folks. There's the peek behind the curtain, or at least some of it.
And it's still basically a free site, right? I know you do have paid subscriptions, or there's some kind of monetization going on there, but
yeah, that's my wife's doing. She got the idea of there's a contribution model out there that people really support what it is we're doing and trying to do, which is local journalism and focus on the urban core of Cleveland and some of its inner ring suburbs. If they support that idea, then we should give them something for it, which is access to this what we call the parlor. And she's wanting me to get into things like promoting or putting on their site plans that we come across and posting those, and anything that's public record. I'm not going to divulge anything that is not public record. And I've had some run-ins with developers and say, hey, you can't post that. That's proprietary. I says, not, you posted that and sent that to the city, and that's on their website. Anybody anywhere in the world can view it. And I'm just putting it on my site. So if you don't want it, on my site, don't put it on their site. So, she wants me to do more of that stuff. And because it's not the city's web portal for the building department is not a very well-known resource. I guess I'm making it more well-known by talking about it.
Sure.
That's okay.
Blowing your sources.
It is, but it's not easy to navigate, and some people just don't want to go on there every day like I do and sift through 20 pages of filings. And I'll do that for them if they're willing to give us a couple of dollars every month, and we'll make it easy for them to find.
Yeah, one of the things I think you do better or as good as anybody in Northeastern Ohio is sort of get into the granular bits of real estate transactions and some of the things that are going on. Some of the other folks that cover it will hit some of the surface items, but your blog and your description seem to go into much greater depth, and being a participant on some of the things you've written about, your stuff is much closer to the actuality. Even you digging it up and not getting it directly from us doing that. So I just want to talk a little bit about, again, what your thought process is behind that, how you sort of go about doing that. And again, as Peter said, you're getting scoops before, some of the other major publications.
Well, and some of that is because we're willing to use anonymous sources. A lot of publications aren't comfortable in doing that. If I'm comfortable with the source and I believe that this person is honorable and is not lying to me. I know that there's some people that may misunderstand information and give it to me, and we may not get that right. But we know that the person is honorable, and they're giving it to us because they love Cleveland, not because they're necessarily trying to pad their own pockets or hurt somebody else. So I usually decide if I'm going to put something on the site and it's coming from an anonymous source, I have to believe in that source. So that's what I did when we wrote about Sherwin-Williams a year before they announced it, because I believed that source was an honorable guy. And even though I had Sherwin-Williams communications director at that time, who I'd known for 20 years, going back to my Sun newspapers days, and I liked the guy, but he flat out lied to me and said, we're not pursuing the headquarters, and you can't even quote me by you can't even quote my denial.
Wow.
I said, well, Mr. Conway, I can't do that. I'm not going to lie for you. So, tell me the truth. What's going on? He says, we're not pursuing anything, is what he said. And I said, well, I have a source that believes that your information is incorrect. Plus, I had spoken to other. He also said, we never even pursued a headquarters in the past. And I knew for a fact that wasn't true, because I knew from some of their civil engineers and architects that they'd hired that they had pursued the headquarters in 2014-15 and set it aside because they were going after Valspar, and their debt burden was too high. They couldn't take on the project at that time. But if they had a reason for pursuing the headquarters in 2014, they certainly had a much bigger reason to pursue one now, because they're a bigger company, and even more so had outgrown their landmark office building downtown. So, sometimes you get sources and hints of information and it just doesn't make sense. But other times it makes perfect sense. And that's what happened with Sherwin-Williams, is that there was a bigger reason for them to pursue a headquarters now, as soon as they got their debt down to what was considered industry levels. So I looked around and said, all right, what's an industry level for a paint and coatings company? And I looked at PPG and Benjamin Moore and some of these others. And what is normal debt burden for them? And it was like a 2-to-1 ratio, debt to equity ratios. And Sherwin-Williams was, many times above that, but at the rate they were paying it down, they would get it down to industry norms at about 2021. I says, well, that would coincide with the lead time that it would take between what they were doing at that time to going through the project development process to where they could put a shovel in the ground, which would be about 2021. I said, that's okay. There you go. It makes sense. So you look for things like that, and if the numbers don't add up or things just don't work out well, you set that thing aside and say, all right, that's a maybe story, and others will do counterpoint types of things, as well, he says it is and he says it isn't. You decide who's telling the truth, that kind of thing.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is that a lot of the national real estate publications, they were absolutely convinced Sherwin-Williams was going to Atlanta or Dallas. It was almost a foregone conclusion. They just sort of scoffed at the idea that they would remain in Cleveland. And a lot of it centered around some of the things that you've talked about with transit-oriented development, which is, hey, Atlanta, Dallas, they've got, the airport infrastructure, they've got the road infrastructure, they've got other things that sort of Cleveland doesn't have. And you were one of the ones that's still sort of stuck with the Cleveland story. Was that sort of the inside track you had, or how close do you think they were from really, going to a Dallas, Atlanta, or Minneapolis, where Spar was from?
Sure. Well, one of the big things was somebody called me up and said, hey, I hear the CEO is going to be building a new home in Bay Village. I said, oh, really? And I said, okay, well, so I said, well, what's his wife's name? And his wife's name is, XYZ. And I said, okay, so let me search and I searched on a bunch of different names and things like that, and saw that his wife had purchased a property over in Bay Village. And so I identified that, and I pulled the building permits and got the dollar amounts and all of that. And it's John, I can't pronounce his last name, Maricus. So I knew that was his place, and that he was building a $10 million home on the lakefront in Bay Village, which seems to be a rather strange thing to do if you're going to Dallas or Atlanta. And no
one's coming back to Cleveland.
What's that?
So no one's coming back to Cleveland for their vacation spot. So
Exactly.
Well, if you're Tom Hanks, according to the rumor, and the other thing was, okay, we don't have the air service that Dallas or Atlanta has, but they've got a private jet fleet based over at Hopkins, and which they can go to. Granted, they can save money by selling it off, but what are you going to sell off used airplanes for? So the argument for them leaving just didn't make sense, and it was a lot more expensive for them to retrain and move people and do all that than it is to move. And again, everything that I was hearing from people is that where they were looking, what spot they were looking for, we had the site nailed down where the headquarters is going to be. We missed on the R&D, but mainly because Sherwin-Williams couldn't get the landowner in the flats to return phone calls. Had that worked out, the R&D facility would be across the river from where it is now.
Wow. They're out in the burbs, correct? Or it's proposed to be out in the suburbs, correct?
Well, it's under construction. Yeah.
Yeah. The R&D. Mhm.
Yeah. Right.
How has you'd mentioned developers, Sherwin, how has our industry, the commercial real estate industry, reacted to your blog? Can you put a description on that?
Yeah, I mean, some of them obviously are concerned when they get an email or a phone call from me and what does he want. But others tend to reach out to me and say, "Hey, I got a story idea for you. You can't write about it right now, but in 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever, give me a shout back and we'll give you the scoop." Sometimes some people give me scoops because they don't want me to get the scoops first and risk getting it wrong. So they'd rather reach out to me first and tell me what's going on and say, "Can you sit on it?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll sit on it." And just let me know when it's okay to hit publish. I get that kind of reaction, and other people are pretty friendly just because we like this stuff. It's interesting to us, and we like to talk about it, and we're all Clevelanders, and we all we all care about this place. So.
Sure. I mean, I think all of us on this pod can agree we're very happy Sherwin decided to stay in Cleveland.
Yeah. Right.
Look at that development daily out of the office. It's fantastic to see.
Yeah, I can actually see it from my window here in Lakewood now.
Oh wow!
Nice, yeah,
yeah. I can see the crane. I have to zoom in really hard on my camera, but I can see it now.
Yeah, no, that's
how many stories high are they, you think, right now? I mean, they keep.
Yeah, they're pretty much matching what the City Club is doing. City Club is like 14, 15 stories right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're in that, at least in terms of the elevator core, not so much on the metal framing. Yeah.
Sure.
What you've sort of seen, so you started your blog in 2011, and you think back at Cleveland real estate in 2011, and you think of the CBD in terms of apartment buildings, you think of Hough City, Tremont, University Circle. You fast forward 12 years, there's been exponential growth in those communities. And I think a lot of the reasons for that growth are what, you push in terms of transit-oriented development or some of the things that are happening in the urban core.
Right.
Could you have imagined, how do you see that as a third party sort of looking back at what happens? How have you seen that grown? What have we done right? What have we done wrong? What can we do better?
Right.
Where do you think it's all going?
Well, the interesting thing is that most of the new apartments that have been added downtown have been in existing buildings. So we haven't seen the construction cranes over downtown. We've literally added something like 10 to 15 new apartment towers of 10 stories or more since the mid, like 2005, 2007, 2010, somewhere in there. I'm trying to remember the exact date. But had we not had the obsolete office buildings downtown to convert, there would have been a multiple number of new buildings downtown. So Cleveland can take credit for seeing something that was a resource, these empty buildings or obsolete buildings that could be converted using historic tax credits. That was a tremendous resource for the city to take advantage of, and it did it. Because the number of obsolete buildings a couple of years ago seemed to be like they were fading away, but COVID and work from home and all that seems to have provided a new supply of buildings for the time being. But again, it's not something that's a resource that the city can depend on long term. And so I think we're going to see more beacon buildings and lumens and City Club buildings, most of which have benefited by the fact that they've had empty parking decks or underused parking decks, at least at night, that they could take advantage of. Lumen got a parking garage because they got some state funding for it. So that was the big deal, and we've done a good job of repurposing these zombie office buildings, as some have called them. So that, I think, is one of the biggest feathers in the cap. When you get outside of downtown and you get into Ohio City and Tremont, you see some of the smaller buildings, but Ohio City is on the cusp of potentially adding a couple of, I don't want to call them skyscrapers, but towers, residential towers. Intro obviously is a very significant building, and we're seeing out of town developers coming here, in part because of the incentives that the city offers that places like Chicago do not. We're starting to hear from the city of Cleveland that they may scale back or end some of those incentives, which I think would be unfortunate. Yeah.
What's happening in Ohio City is incredible. I mean, I shouldn't say incredible, but it's about there. It's just that corner where Intro is.
Yeah.
Sleepy retail plaza for decades.
Well, that was a TOD site that RTA had worked out with the prior property owner and said, hey, come up with some ideas on how we could densify this corner and make it mixed use and turn it from a suburban strip shopping center into something of scale. And they came up with some ideas, and we all looked at that and says, yeah, that's beautiful, but is that ever going to happen? Well, it happened and then some. It was what was built was even bigger than what RTA and the prior property owner was reluctant to even consider this, but RTA kind of dragged them into it and said, will you consider something? And Harbor Bay did a tremendous job with that and densifying that, and they have a potential phase 2 if they can get city incentives to make it happen, and maybe even a phase 3 at some point, which would be an office component. So there's what's happening there is something that I couldn't have dreamt of 10 plus years ago.
Yeah. Or even just leaving the city and going up Detroit Road, right, heading towards Lakewood. You think about 2011, what that strip would have looked like. Wasn't there. Then you now drive up it now and you see everything from the quarter and Church and State and all the other activities that are going on there. It's really been impressive.
Yeah, it's a whole corridor into itself completely.
Well, and same thing with Lorraine as well. The biggest thing that's hurting Lorraine is all those used car dealerships. Who, there was one of them, I'm not going to say all of them are like this, but one of them was busted up a little over a decade ago as being a money laundering operation. I'm trying to figure out what is the business basis for the others. And they've been approached, all of them, for to buy their properties and so they could be developed, but they've so far asked for too much money or simply was not interested. So that's one of the biggest things that's holding back that corridor. And if the city or somebody else can figure out how to get those property owners to sell or become partners or whatever, that would be a nice magic wand to wave.
Because there's a lot of potential up and down Lorraine. This is in the 40s, the 50s, even up towards the west 60s.
Right.
And
it's moving west.
Yeah, I was driving that corridor last week and noticed dilapidated buildings that are just sitting there. Again, I'm sure they've been approached by developers countless times.
Yeah, one thing that might kick things into a different direction is shifting from a property tax to a land tax, so that you pay taxes based on the land rather than on the land and building, and so that you're not taxed on the building anymore. So that would be an inducement to property owners to, all right, put a building on my land. That's one possibility that might stimulate some development of those reluctant property owners.
That's
what do you think about all the development happening in between Midtown and University Circle? There's obviously a number of major towers. And then, over what Fairmont is doing, on 105th there.
Yeah, I'll mention Midtown briefly because to me the key to Midtown is the development at the corner of 55th and Carnegie, whose name just went right out of my head. It's a Philadelphia company that's seeking to develop it. Boy, why am I not thinking of it?
I think Carnegie.
We chatted with them.
Yeah. It's a 2-word name. I could Google it real fast here, but
Anyway, the linchpin's 55th and Carnegie.
yeah, to me that development there is the one that's holding it back. They've been trying to get tax credits for it. So that one is Warner and Swayze. So see, if I stop thinking about it, I'll think of it.
Yeah.
So Warner and Swayze. If they
I was
can-
thinking of a different group, so I'm glad you came up with it.
Okay. So that to me is the key to that area. What's
Why?
interesting though is that the Cleveland Foundation they just recently got some brownfield public dollars from the state to clean up a property just to the east of the elevated railroad bridge on Euclid, east of 55th, and they're cleaning it up now. So I am surprised to see that they're moving forward with that because everything that I've been told is, wait for Warner and Swayze, wait for Warner and Swayze. Well, I guess some people aren't willing to wait for Warner and Swayze anymore and are moving forward. And so that whoever gets that area going first in terms of new construction and enlivening that area, that's gonna really kickstart that area.
Ken, has there been any movement on the old Agora Theater and the individuals that purchased that and what they're repurposing that to?
Yeah, that's I believe there's a few dozen apartments going into that. There's also phase 3 that I just saw a permit go through for that. It's more for interior demo at this point. So there is activity going on there. I don't recall any specific construction activity, but I haven't heard anything that it's not going forward.
Gotcha. Nothing's, yeah, okay. Understood.
So as far as University Circle goes, that to me is the straw that stirs the drink in Cleveland, and look at what's going on with the clinic and how many big projects that they've got going on right now. It's one of, if not the biggest building boom that they've got in their history. So there's 2 million square foot buildings going on in Cleveland right now, and one of them's downtown, the other one's at University Circle, and the one at University Circle does not get talked about enough.
Yeah.
And there's thousands of jobs in the balance there. I hear from a number of developers that they're eyeballing high-rise sites in University Circle, if not some infill sites surrounding University Circle, like Canez and Orleans, and trying to think of some others that are doing some infill in the area around it. So it's not just University Circle; it's Fairfax, it's Hough, it's Glenville, even East Cleveland now. We wrote about a $100 million project. A New York developer was aware of what's happening at University Circle and made enough phone calls to some of the institutions to confirm what he's been hearing, that it's a growth area and that he should be investing in there. And like a lot of real estate investors, they look for undervalued properties. And you're not going to find a more target-rich environment for undervalued properties than East Cleveland, if you can get past the stigma that area has had for 30 to 50 years. So they're willing to invest in that area and take on that risk, and God love them for it. So
Orleans putting up some new buildings in some of those tertiary submarkets.
Yes, they're
Exciting.
focusing mainly on the Glenville area. They've worked with Famicos Foundation, and I don't know if they've gotten so much into Hough yet, but some other developers have. I mentioned some of those in some recent articles about Hough, that properties that they've had for many years are getting a little gray and rough around the edges. So they're putting dollars into those and fixing them up. They've got low income housing tax credits, LIHTC, to fix those up. And that's one of the things that community has really wanted to do, was to avoid the gentrification, so that they don't push out residents, that there's an affordable option for residents who have stuck through that area as it's depopulated, And it's actually a pretty quiet, peaceful neighborhood right now. If you've ever been through there, it's semi-rural in some ways.
Interesting.
And so it's, people are investing in there now, and it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of market rate, a little bit of workforce, and it's a little bit affordable.
I went to a happy hour last year at Chateau Hough. Who knew there was
Yes,
a winery in the Hough
there
neighborhood
is.
of Cleveland?
Yes, there is. Yep,
Yeah.
right out there on 66.
Yeah, it was fun, very fun.
Right. And just north of there, you got the ballpark, the old ballpark, which is one of the few, if only, historic ballparks that a major league team has abandoned, but is at least there, at least somewhat partially still standing.
League Park, correct?
League Park, yeah.
League
So
Park.
it's a magnet. It's a focal point that can be developed around, and you've already got the new Hough Library there in the corner, and there's been a church that's expanded across the street, and some new housing going in, and I think that's an area worth paying attention to.
Yeah, well, it's obviously Tony Manna's directing a lot of that, and they've had great success with Axis and Ansel over there, sort of on the Case campus, and Foundry, their new deal, has again broken all expectations. So having somebody with that kind of vision and money is critical.
Here's this development on the edge of Hough. It opens up in the middle of the pandemic, and it leases out within less than a year at the prices that they were charging.
Yeah.
And they go and build thing over in at 73rd and Euclid, where very few people are investing in new housing. There's been some projects, but that thing leases out before the paint dries on it. And you have to think that there's more. What else can you do? Look at how fast Centric leased out, and that encouraged One University Circle to get built. That thing leased out in less than a year, which encouraged the Artisan to get built. I'm dying to see how fast that thing leases out at the prices they're charging, which is gorgeous building. If you haven't seen the interiors of that thing, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
To me, it's even nicer than the Lumen. If that thing
high praise. That's high praise.
It is $3-4 a square foot. So and we're talking about how things have changed from 10 years ago. You would have been laughed out of the building if you would have said $3 a square foot in Cleveland and they would lease out 10 years ago. We were hoping to get $2 a square foot 10 years ago. So
that's exciting. We're a big fan of Lumen. I know our team is. We're excited to see what happens over at City Club Apartments.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fun things going on in the city.
Yeah, and it's very exciting to see how fast these things are leasing out too. I mean, Intro leased out at the prices in Ohio City, which is not downtown, obviously, or University Circle, and it leased out at $3 a square foot, a big building, before the grand opening.
Yeah, no, it was amazing to sort of see, like you said, how quickly that leased out, the rents that they were getting, I think the reception that they received, and again, it gives that's the biggest question we get is, where are all these people coming from? Where are they getting all these people to fill these $3 a square foot apartments? And everybody's got sort of their own little take on it. Do you have any kind of take on, hey, have we hit an inflection point? Or can we build more? Because if we build more, there's demand for it. Or are we getting close to hitting a wall?
Well, we'll know when it takes longer for buildings to start leasing out, and we haven't reached that yet. So the answer, I think, right now is no. Yeah. So I think we can build more buildings, and where the people are coming from. Look at where people are doing their searches on Zillow and some of the other places. They also have the moving van inventory, where moving vans coming from. And we're seeing, for the first time ever, I saw that Los Angeles was one of the top 3 metro areas that people are searching for places in Cleveland from. I'm 55 years old, and when I was a kid, my dad used to do some work with Playhouse Square and the old Cleveland Growth Association, and he would have been amazed if somebody said, well, they're going to be Los Angeles is going to be one of the top 3 areas that people are going to be looking for apartments in Cleveland for. That just is crazy to me.
That is crazy.
We've got Peter Graylis.
Yeah, there you go. Transient from
Former
LA.
LA resident.
Former LA guy came back home. We all come back home. That's wild, though, that people in
Yeah.
LA are searching Cleveland. But
Yeah.
hey, I mean,
If you think of a
you
lot
show
of the
up to town.
dynamics, you know, I think a lot of the people from LA can still work remotely now with this shift of culture. And then all of a sudden you can keep your job in LA and you can go back closer to maybe where you came from and live in Cleveland for this cost of living.
Or you can just afford a house,
you're seeing
even if you're
that,
from
exactly.
California, you know?
Ken, I agree. You know, I agree with something you said. I think that the stuff that's happening in University Circle is not getting enough attention because of what's happening downtown. And I agree with, like, you know, a lot of the things that have happened there are just as nice, if not nicer than, you know, some of the recent stuff that we've seen come online downtown. And something that we've always kind of heard was, you know, a lot of like at least the nicer stuff downtown, you know, you have a somewhat of a musical chairs. I was part of the musical chairs of just living in the different apartments downtown, but a lot of the tenants that were living downtown were working in University Circle, and there was just a lack of supply there. Now that supply is building, and you're probably getting a lot of those tenants that were living downtown, working in University Circle, living in University Circle, now that they have options. Do you think that there's going to be a little bit of a shift on who that tenant is downtown, or do you think it's still going to come? A lot of the downtown tenants are still coming from, you know, working in University Circle.
Well, again, it's going to be, excuse me, some of the, you know, responses to new buildings. You know, as each new building opens up, how long does it take for it to fill out and at what price? So the next big measuring stick is going to be the City Club apartments. Beyond that, I think another big measuring stick is going to be the Centennial. And from all indications, that project is a go. I'm, you know, hear that they've got tenants for it. So, you know, and I'm talking about commercial tenants. So there's all indications that thing's a go, and that's more of a workforce building, which is a very different market than what you've seen downtown. So I think that one would probably lease out sooner than maybe some of the others, although it's a very big building. It's 800 and something units in there.
It's a massive building.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, how long that thing fills out is going to be very interesting, and at the prices they do.
Well, I wouldn't bet against either one of them. Both of those guys, Frank Sanito is a visionary and I think is a brilliant guy. And the Centennial, I think, feeds to some of his strengths and what he can do down there. And Jonathan at City Club, you know, we've been involved in some City Club projects around the country.
Okay.
And, you know, they're branded great. And he is as good as an apartment operator, because he's a guy that really sort of is blending the true hospitality, you know, multifamily versions. And I really think it's going to be spectacularly successful.
Sure. And he's hinted that that's not going to be his last building in Cleveland. And
yeah,
when you talk to him, you know, you try to get some more out of him, and he says, well, it's probably not going to be downtown, be the second one. My money's on University Circle. I know some people may think Ohio City is a possibility, but I would tend to think that University Circle is the next place. And here's another interesting thing. And I wrote an article about this maybe I don't know how many months ago, that with the number of people that are remote working now, I think that the downtown workforce population, at least in the offices, is down around 60% of what it was before the pandemic. You take that number along with the number of people that are living downtown and compare that with the number of people that are working in and near University Circle. And I'm going to include the Cleveland Clinic in that, even though that's in Fairfax. A lot of people think that's in University Circle, but it's in Fairfax. So if you include that and University Circle, I would wager that University Circle is getting pretty close to the number of jobs that downtown has, and may even eclipse it in, let's say, the next 5-10 years. And we may even see it eclipse downtown in terms of residents, thanks to Case Western, which is seeing tremendous growth in its enrollment. Wouldn't be surprised to see University Circle become the #1 hub in Cleveland.
I would agree. I
agree.
All the way around. And what's interesting too is that it's being anchored by true people magnets. right? Cleveland Clinic and UH or Case Western Reserve aren't going to pick up and move the buildings or headquarters, quote unquote, to Chicago, or Atlanta or whatever. So you see some of the stuff that happens in the central business district, or even some of the shifts that you've seen in manufacturing and so forth, where, manufacturing moved from, Cleveland, Detroit to Mexico to China. You just don't have that same dynamics with the sort of the folks that we're talking about now driving the economic development.
And if you look at what attracts people to certain areas, for a lot of them, it's the public spaces. It's the places where you can meet and convene and socialize and interact with each other. And it's pretty tough to top University Circle in terms of its public realm, between the Wade Lagoon or some of the parks,
Museums.
Yeah. So, those are really tough to beat. And that's something that downtown hasn't yet tapped into. It's done a little bit with the lakefront and a little bit with the riverfront, but hasn't fully capitalized on those potential public realms. I know they want to, but we've seen, plan after plan after plan in the past. And if they can finally turn the corner and get some of those plans to become reality, then they can start to compete with the University Circle in terms of the public realm. And hopefully that'll happen.
Maybe as we're sort of nearing the end here, maybe let's talk about a couple of the sort of big projects that are out there, right? Ballpark Village, obviously the movement of the Cleveland Browns and building a whole football village and everything over there, redevelopment of the lakefront and what can be done there. How much momentum do you see in that? Do you see any of that stuff taking place? Or even, obviously we've seen Dan Gilbert and the whole Tower City project and what that looks like. And I just want it to happen now. Put all those things in Ballpark Village, move redevelopment, lakefront, and do that. I know it's going to take, I'll probably be gone by the time it's finally done, but
anytime you say village with a sports park, it's always like a good time. Like you feel like that's where you want to be.
Yeah. Part of the complexity with all of those things is the public infrastructure element to it. With North Coast Harbor, that was a major public infrastructure project that had happened in 1988. They dug out the old parking lot at Municipal Stadium and put in, a harbor, which that's what you needed to build a nice public realm area and put those museums there. There's a lot more that has to be done, obviously, and if they can pull that off, that to me is the biggest hurdle that has to be overcome. So creating this land bridge / transportation center down there, to me is a big hurdle. Moving or downgrading the shoreway into a boulevard is another huge hurdle that has to be overcome. Dealing with the hillsides, both over at Irishtown Bend and the bulkheads along the river and Canal Road along and just below Tower City. Those are all the big public infrastructure projects, and it's a lot for the administration to take on at the same time. I hope they can do it. It may take a while, and of course, there's never enough public dollars to do everything that you want. So hopefully, they can get enough done that would, move the chains, to use a football term, and advance this. So if those things can happen, I think you'll see some follow-on private sector investment, because private capital usually follows public capital.
Which do you think is the most likely to happen of some of those, big sort of projects?
Well, I've never been very good at predicting. So, to me, the easiest one, and I put easiest in quotes, is really not any of those that are dependent on major public infrastructure investments, but that's the old nucleus site that Bedrock now owns. That it's about as ready to go as a development site could be. So I would think that would probably be the lowest hanging fruit that could be tapped into. Certainly the Sherwin-Williams old headquarters, it's another big building like Centennial. It's going to take a lot of historic tax credits and other public dollars to make that happen, but it's there, and it's now in the hands of a deep-pocketed developer that has proven that it can build repurpose old buildings like they did in Detroit. They have less of a track record of new construction mega projects, and the problems that they're having with the Hudson site in Detroit is something to watch. See how they can overcome that, and if they can avoid that same thing here.
Anthony, you're nodding your head. What's going on there? What's going on in the Hudson site? Or Ken, maybe you're better versed.
I was gonna say Ken's probably more in tune with it, but it's been sitting and talking about it for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, they broke ground for that in 2017, and it's not done yet, and it's not going to be done this year. And it's like I say, I forget how much it's over budget by, $500 million or something. I can't remember the numbers.
Downtown Detroit, CBD.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Peter, I remember as a kid watching the Hudson site get demolished by the wrecking ball.
I'm old enough to remember when it was in business as a department store.
Right. Well, yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it's an old department store.
Yeah, it was the largest.
Like a Higbee's or a May Company or
largest department store outside of New York.
Oh wow.
Yeah, 800,000 square feet, if I remember correct. Or no, it was over 1 million, well over 1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Hudson site development is a high rise. I think it's 48 stories, 600 something feet tall, taller than Sherwin-Williams, but not by a lot. But it's a big building. It's gonna be second tallest in Detroit.
Oh wow. Huh.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's an advanced state of construction, so I'm pretty sure they're going to see it through to the end, even if it, hair lips Dan Gilbert. So.
Yeah.
Ken, thank you. Really appreciate this conversation. Thanks for taking the time. I think we got some fun things here to be chatted about. If folks want to reach out to you, I know you're very active on LinkedIn. Your blog, for those living under a rock, is NEOtrans.blog.
Correct.
Ken, thanks. It's been a pleasure. We appreciate you.
Blog. Right.
Yes. So yeah, thanks again. We appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks again for having me.
It's been our pleasure.
Thanks
for
guys.
listening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.